Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple.
Reigning champions France squeezed by England in the quarterfinals, 2-1, courtesy of Tchouaméni and Olivier Giroud, with Harry Kane scoring one pen and missing the other for England. The XG swung in England's favour, but 1.5 of that XG was from penalties. But what tactics did we see from both sides, and how did Southgate's adaptation with his wingers keep England in the game? Let's take a look. And we'll begin with England in possession as they had more of the ball. When England had the ball, France once again defended in a lopsided 4-4-2, with Mbappe operating high on the left-hand side and sometimes even ahead of Giroud, who could stay deep on Rice when needed, whilst Rabiot would come into this tucked-in left-hand side position, with Griezmann often dropping deeper into the midfield. This shape could also vary if they were being more aggressive, as Giroud could move onto Maguire to press, with Griezmann looking to pick up Rice instead. So Giroud and Mbappe form an off-axis front two, with the midfield four being quite narrow and tucked in, with Rabiot being the widest left. When building up, England built up with a minimum of a back three, with Walker tucking in off the right-hand side. And this is the position he plays his club football in either way. But it also gave England the security of Walker's pace against Mbappe on the transition, and for the most part he was able to handle that. And France's shape of the narrow 4-4-2, with Giroud occasionally tying up Rice, meant that it was extremely difficult for England to penetrate right through the centre of the pitch. But they were quite aggressive in looking to use the wide areas to their advantage, firstly down the left-hand side. England's build-up shape was quite flexible, as it could be a 3-2-5 with Bellingham pushing up into the left half space and Henderson on the right if Shaw had stayed deeper. Alternatively, Bellingham could stay deep alongside Rice, with Foden moving inside, allowing Shaw to push up higher down the left-hand side. But we did see England have a lot of success when Shaw did start deeper, as when he received the ball, Dembele tended to get drawn towards him. In these situations, Foden would also be quite wide, and Koundé looked to remain touch tight on him for the most part, so Foden would often drop deeper to give Shaw a passing option. But at the same time, this would drag Koundé out of position, and Bellingham would often look to burst into the space created. But Tchouaméni, as the deepest midfielder, was quite disciplined in tracking these runs. So here Shaw starts deep, and he'll eventually draw Dembele towards him, meaning that Foden is wider, and initially Bellingham is quite central. But we see Dembele is drawn towards Shaw, and Foden is beginning to drop deep, drawing Koundé with him, and Bellingham is making that run into the space, although Tchouaméni is disciplined and follows him. So with the England shape being quite fluid, they look to overload the left-hand side even more, giving Shaw permission to push higher up, and Foden would tuck into the half space, but now Bellingham would also join Foden in the half space, either pushing ahead of him when a man was drawn towards him, or operating generally in these deeper regions. That was also combined with Kane being willing to come across the pitch as well. So one of Bellingham and Foden tended to be free to receive the ball, and they combined quite well, especially in the second half, looking to play cute 1-2s to get around the pressure and move higher up the pitch. But another advantage of this is that it would force France to come across the pitch in order to compensate, and as we discussed, their midfield was already quite narrow, so now Rabiot would be dragged even further across in order to compensate, meaning that Hernandez would have to tuck in the pitch as well. This was made worse by the fact that Mbappe tended to stay high up the pitch rather than tracking back. So at times, England were able to maneuver the switch to Saka, who would then be 1-versus-1 with Hernandez. And crucially, England would support Saka once the switch came across, either with Henderson underlapping or overlapping, or even the likes of Bellingham making the run from across the pitch, looking to provide an option. And they did get into some dangerous situations. So down the left, Foden is high as well as Shaw, Bellingham and Kane out of shot. They have now been joined by Kane, who's dropped deep, meaning that France has to shift across the pitch. As a result, Saka is free to receive the switch and is now 1-versus-1 with Hernandez, with Henderson looking to make the run. But the right-hand side was also utilised well for England. In their default shapes, the midfield could be fairly man-to-man, especially with Rabiot in this tucked-in position. So, at times, England could easily work a 1-versus-1 for Saka against Hernandez, and he did look quite dangerous in these situations. But as the game went on, with Rabiot being in this half central midfielder, half winger position, and Mbappe staying high and not really tracking back, Henderson began to identify the right hand side as the region with the most space, so he tended to shift into this region. And this would often be helped by Kane being willing to drop into the midfield, making it more difficult for Rabiot to immediately commit to Henderson. So now there was the potential for Henderson and Saka to have a 2 versus 1 against Hernandez. But what we could also see is that when Rabiot was dragged wider and Kane was staying higher up the pitch, Saka could move into these more inside positions and provide an option between the midfield, and we did at times see England able to find him, looking dangerous on one occasion in particular. So Henderson is out wide, allowing Saka infield, and Rabiot is caught between two players. So now Saka comes further over, opening up the temporary space to receive the pass. The ball eventually does come to him, and he's able to drive on to have a shot on goal. But with France sitting fairly deep, England struggled to create clear chances. But France were eventually the winners, so what tactics did they use in possession? When France were in possession, Rabiot and Griezmann tended to push much higher up than Tchouaméni, who was the single pivot. And the way that Southgate initially used his wingers when defending put England at risk. Initially when France were deep, Kane was tasked with pressing one of the centre-backs, while Saka would have to come from out to in to press the other one, looking to apply a lot of pressure on Varane and Upamecano. But potentially having your fullback 1 versus 1 against Mbappe is bad enough, but adding one of the best attacking fullbacks in Europe to that equation, making it a 2 versus 1, is even worse. So this was not the best ploy by Southgate, and they were lucky not to be punished. So here we see Saka coming from out to in, and on other occasions France were able to work the ball to Hernandez, and he would then drive up the pitch. So Southgate was quick to change that, and Saka began to defend in a more traditional manner. And instead, if England wanted a second man pressing alongside Kane, Henderson would push up when the moment was right to apply pressure and force France backwards. But France looked just as dangerous down the right hand side, and Jules Koundé tended to begin quite deep. And when he received the ball, much like Saka early on, Foden was drawn in towards him. And Dembele didn't tend to start high up the pitch, where he could easily be picked up by Shaw. Instead, he tended to drop a little bit deeper, whilst Griezmann, from his central midfield position, would push up into the half space, and this caused danger for England. Because if Shaw stayed deeper due to the threat of Griezmann, Dembele could now receive the ball and have momentum when he drove up the pitch, still leading to a 2 versus 1 against Shaw. But if Shaw started too high on Dembele, if France were able to work the ball to Griezmann, he would be in plenty of space, with Maguire being forced out of position. Koundé begins deep and Foden has one eye on him. So Varane is able to make the pass to Dembele. Griezmann is already in the half space, and Shaw then has to go and close down Dembele, opening up space behind him. So now Dembele finds Griezmann, and Bellingham has to make an excellent tackle to stop the attack. But Deschamps was quite crafty in the use of his centre-backs, who were quite aggressive when on the ball to move high up the pitch, especially when Kane was the sole man pressing, as he could only cover one of the centre-backs. So, at times, Koundé would be pressed too closely and Foden might cut off the passing lane to Dembele. So, both Upamecano and Varane were instructed to drive into the midfield to open up new passing angles, where they could then look to find the dangerous wingers. Once again, Foden is watching Koundé, but this time Varane is willing to drive into the midfield. This now opens up the passing lane into Dembele, so he and Griezmann will be 2 versus 1 up against Shaw, eventually giving Dembele the space to make a dangerous cross. So once again, Southgate adapted by now getting Foden to start deeper on Dembele, allowing Shaw to worry about Griezmann. And once England did this, and with France having gone ahead, France were not creating many chances, as the centre was protected quite well. But sometimes you can't account for moments of brilliance, like Tchouaméni's shot and Griezmann's cross. Overall, this was a tense match that could have gone either way, and France will be delighted to set up a semi-final against the impressive Morocco, and perhaps get one step closer to retaining the World Cup. For the manager tactical scores, both teams set up well, with clear tactical plans to adapt to the opponent's strengths, meaning that both Deschamps and Southgate earned 7s. But what are your ratings? Drop them down below.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, you might enjoy the content available on my Patreon. Not only does Patreon help to support the continued production of content, as I am a one-man team, but it also gives you early access to videos that will come on the channel. You'll also get exclusive videos, get to vote on polls, and so much more. And it's cheaper than ever, no longer having a tier system, so everyone on the Patreon gets access to all the content. So head over to patreon.com/footballmadesimple to check it out.
And a special thanks to my latest patrons like Ajiro, Oyitso, Andrej Bar, and Gabriel Israel. But that's all for today, and remember, keep it simple.